Unless I'm told otherwise, we're going to get going. Buenas tardes, bienvenidos a esta sesión.
Good afternoon. Welcome to this WEF session dedicated to Latin America. We're living in a moment of confusion, geopolitical, political, economical confusion. We're in a moment of fragmentation, and maybe in such complex times, if you have a scheme and a little bit of desire to take risks, you may find good opportunities. And this is what we want to discuss during this session. The title is a bit of a provocation, and let's see what panelists answer to this provocative title. This is the moment of Latin America. Is this the question? Is this the moment of Latin America? And this is what we're going to see with this group of wonderful panelists who will help us understand the situation nowadays. I'd like to start, and I'll introduce them as they take the floor. I'd like to start with Alberto van Klaveren, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Chile. Alberto, please give us your perspective from Chile, a country that has made great efforts for the sustainable development and productivity, and that uses and that has used international trade as a great lever for development. Thank you, Arancha. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation of the World Economic Forum, and it's a pleasure to be among such important panelists. I'd like to say, first of all, about Latin America, the following. For a long time, and maybe for centuries, Latin America was always seen as a great promise. But a great drama is that this promise seems to never become reality. And this doesn't mean, on the other hand, that we should be too pessimistic about our region. And the aim of this region is actually to see some very promising trends for our region. First of all, we should say that Latin America is very resilient. Its economies have proven to be resilient. The recovery after the post-pandemic recovery was quite acceptable, I'd say. And nowadays, our growth figures as a region are acceptable. They're not the best ever, especially if we compare it to Asian Southeast, but still they're reasonable, and it's above other regions' growth rates. But what matters in Latin America is its potential. It's a potential that is explained by the resources we have. These are very relevant resources for the world economy nowadays. I'm thinking about food resources. I'm thinking about mining resources. I'm thinking about the great rivers we have in the region and the great ecological reservations. So there's a whole significant and necessary potential. And above all, and I'd like to really underline this, Latin America may have a great role in green transition globally and obviously regionally. And that leads me to the Chilean case. We're making a significant effort to transition to a green economy. We have a good deal of resources for it: solar energy in the north, wind energy in the south, wind power in the south, sun power in the north, and minerals as lithium, copper, and also human resources that are also significant. And actually, this is where the main challenge we have as a country is a challenge which is common to Latin America, and I'm talking about increasing productivity. This is our weak point in the region. We're not the only region to suffer such a weakness. I've participated in a panel that has discussed the European situation and there also productivity is growing too slowly, and the same in Chile. A recent report from the OECD shows a positive trend from a country, but still it explains that we should improve our capacities and the skills, educational skills, and more training. We need more training, more lifelong learning, because we need much more skilled human resources. And this, it would be my introduction, generally speaking. Thank you, Alberto. Now I'd like to give the floor to Fernando Honorato Barbosa.
As a chief economist that is looking at the outlook, the economic outlook of the region, the opportunities, but also the risks. And there are a number of risks that we can't be blind to. So I would ask you, Fernando, walk us a little bit through what the outlook looks like and walk us also through the risks.
Oh, muchas gracias. Yo voy a hablar en inglés porque si no voy a hablar en portuñol, entonces mejor yo hablen en inglés.
Thank you. I'll speak in English.
For the audience and for the questions. So let me tell you a little bit about what Latin America has done great in the last few years, and that's about the external accounts and balance of payments. So we overcame lots of imbalances of the past. We have much lower current account deficits. We have floating exchange rate regimes. We have all independent central banks. And the exchange rates are more or less aligned, a little bit undervalued. So I see Latin America well prepared to face the type of challenges we've been discussing here in Davos about the global environment. Having said that, when I look at domestic policies, and my country is specifically one of the cases, I see the fiscal policies is still a challenge. And why I'm telling you that? Because most of our countries, maybe huge exceptions are Argentina these days and Peru, are running primary deficits. The level of indebtedness is typically growing, even Chile that has one of the very lowest levels, Chile and Peru, one of the lowest levels of the region. And we still have inflation above the ceiling of the target. So that means that interest rates are high. And if what we hear here in Davos about fragmentation, about raising tariffs, and about more protectionism means higher prices for the global economy for companies, that means more costs, well, I fear this could have a feedback loop into Latin America, because if for whatever reason we are not able to cut interest rates in the next few months or so, the fiscal accounts will cost some charge for the region, because there are still huge imbalances there. And finally, well, part of the countries of the region depend a lot on China. So this divide between US and China matters a lot for the region. So the way Latin countries will position themselves in this dispute might matter a lot in the next few years for their future. But I'll get back to the point in a minute.
Okay, thank you very much. The risks on the inflation, on the inflationary side, the risks on the fiscal side, and the risk of having to choose between the US and China. Let me now go to Linda Kirkpatrick. You are the president for the Americas of MasterCard, and you are working at the microeconomic level. You know, he's the macro, you are the micro. Walk us a little bit through all the efforts that your company has been doing through private-public partnerships, especially on the financial side, and especially on connecting so many companies to the financial sector.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to, and honored to be part of the conversation. As I look around the circle here, and I think about the power of what each of us bring individually and how collectively we can be so much bigger and better than any of us could be by ourselves. It's a pretty powerful thought, and we've experienced that firsthand. At MasterCard, we're a global company. We service 220 countries and territories. We connect 3.4 billion cardholders with 150 million merchants around the globe, and we do it for $10 trillion in volume every year. 200 billion times a year. So there is no way we can do what we do without the support and the partnership of the public sector. And Latin America is a prime example of where this works really, really well. And we've got some great examples. But if you think about it, each of us has a role to play. In the financial sector, for us, MasterCard knows payments, MasterCard knows security, MasterCard understands ubiquity and interoperability with other markets. The public sector understands the constituents, the needs of the constituents the best. and has direct access to those constituents. What we share are common goals around driving financial inclusion, because we know that financial inclusion drives empowerment, empowerment drives commerce, and commerce rises all of our boats. And so for us, the equation around a public-private partnership in Latin America for us is extraordinarily important as a growth engine for the company. Many of our top 10 markets in the company are in Latin America, Mexico and Brazil, no exception. And for us, understanding how to unlock financial inclusion, leveraging these public partnerships has been our key priority for us. And just a couple of examples of where this has worked well. In Costa Rica, we have enabled transport, both in buses and on the railway. We've now enabled passengers to use their products contactlessly to gain access to public transport, to make it safer, more secure, more transparent, less prone to theft. And now 43% of consumers in Costa Rica that ride the rail are leveraging these technologies. And that has led to growth in other sectors as well. Because if you use a product and you're using it every day on a rail or on a bus, you're using it with other small businesses, you're using it in other places around the cities, and that's ultimately driving success for everyone. Another example in Mexico, Banco del Bienestar, where we are leveraging the relationship with the government bank to issue disbursements, medical emergencies, scholarships, agriculture, to the citizens of the state, of the country. So we are leveraging every opportunity we can to bring the power of our assets, coupled with what the government is bringing to the table, to do the right thing for the consumers that we serve.
Thank you very much, Linda. Let me now go to Argentina. Demian Reidel, you are the chairman of the Council of Advisors to the President of Argentina. And let's say that you've been busy those last months. You've been doing a fair amount of work. So we want to hear a little bit the outlook of all these reforms that you've been doing. Floor to you.
Well, so let me first address, I'll do this in English. Let me first address the title of this panel. Is the Latin American economic tide turning? No. I mean, I would say this. I think that the divergence between the different countries in Latin America could not be more staggering. And I don't think that's random. I think that it's easily explained by the policies that the different countries are following. So let me address, just right off the bat, the economic adjustment, the fiscal adjustment particularly, that Argentina has been going through. And I would say, you know, sometimes people are concerned that the magnitude of this adjustment has been very, very large, and the fear is that that can affect especially the more vulnerable. Mm-hmm. So, you know, there's this beautiful phrase that I love, which I think is Margaret Thatcher's, which is the following: populist governments fall when they run out of other people's money. So when you're a populist government and you run out of OPM, you don't have a choice. You don't have a choice of, oh, whether I am going to adjust or not. It's not an if, it's how. So it's not whether you do it or not, it's how you're going to do it. And there are two ways of doing this. One is the caveman approach, which is what we have been following. It's a tried and true, honored tradition where you destroy things. What is the caveman approach? Is when you really run out of OPM, what most governments try to do is, what can they do? They go and they print money. Because it's just tempting, right? It's easy, you don't even need to go through Congress. And what happens is the typical, you know, inflation rises, the currency devalues, economic activity plummets, and country risk goes up, and it's generally a catastrophe. So if you try to do the other approach, which is the rational approach, you grab the bull by the horns, and you, instead of lying to yourself and to the society, saying, oh, we're going to continue with this because this is not adjusting. No, you're lying. You're adjusting, and it's the worst type of economic adjustment. If instead of that, you do the rational thing, the right thing, it's not, maybe a year ago, this could have been more controversial. I think today is significantly less controversial. What happens when you try to control the runaway deficits that these governments love to follow? Well, country risk goes down, inflation comes down, economic activity recovers, the currency strengthens, and generally economic conditions improve. This is not a miracle. In fact, it's funny. There was an article, I think it was at the Washington Post, which is, it's a miracle how quickly inflation fell in Argentina. No, it isn't a miracle. We know. You print, goes up. You stop printing, goes down. So I say that if the laws of physics are a miracle, then call that a miracle. But this is hardly something that was not to be expected. So when you have a government that actually not only has the right ideas, but also has the guts to follow them through to completion, but we are at the very beginning, so it's not completion. But if you do that, this is actually the blueprint. I would say I don't want to tell Latin America or anyone what to do, but I would say if you're going to choose what to follow, this is a new example. This has not been tried to this extent before. So I'd say to Latin America in particular, but to the world, if you follow the ideas of freedom and actually retract the government expansion, and you try to do fiscal discipline and give back the power of spending and freedom to the private sector, better things seem to be happening. So I don't know. So which one do you prefer? I say we're doing well so far. So
Okay.
I'll stop here.
Thank you, Demian. In the second round, I'm going to be asking each one of you for one good news and from one big risk that you would put top of the list. But antes de hacer eso, quiero escuchar.
But before that, I would like to
Bisono Haza, es el ministro
listen to Victor Bisono Haza, Minister of Industry, Trade and SMEs of the Dominican Republic. Minister, I know that you have worked a lot in another aspect of the economy which counts, which is the attractivity of investments, to be able to improve human capital and business capital in the country. So how do you see all this from the Dominican Republic? Minister Arancha, first of all, I would like to congratulate Marisol, who's here, for the invitation, and thank her for the invitation to the forum. I think that, as Alberto was saying, Minister Alberto was saying, Latin America, above all the qualities that he has already mentioned, there is the youth of the population, the absence of wars, serious wars, and there is a lot of prosperity, and we know how to go further. The Dominican Republic, as the World Bank has just said in its recent report, the January report, has a growth projection of 5.5% GDP. And this is the figure that we've been having for already a decade, with an inflation that is under control, around 3.35% last year. And this year, for us in particular, well, during COVID, we learned a very important lesson, which is to capitalize public-private partnership. In a world that was locked, we realized that we could assure our production, and not only that, but also to be one of the first countries to vaccinate people and open our doors to the world. So we could start immediately not to only feed our 10 million inhabitants, but also our 11 million visitors, and also people from Haiti, which is our neighbor country. So we learned how to assure local production, and with our productive national sector, we try to do things together and well done, with an independent justice. We allocated more than 4% to education, which is a figure that has increased now to take into account the new modalities of development. For instance, nearshoring with the United States in semiconductors. So we have reached Purdue University, MIT, Texas, EOE from Spain, and we have also looked for a way for people who are already in Dominican Republic. They could have also other benefits. And then I'm telling you all this because sometimes when we think about the Dominican Republic, we only think about tourism, but tourism is just one aspect of it. And there are many approaches to tourism that we're consolidating now. Dominican Republic is a good example of institutionality of a government with a president like Luis Abinader, who believes, and he says it without any fear, that the private sector needs to be in charge of the development of high-quality jobs, and we need to treat them with respect. That's why we break records every year with foreign direct investment in exports and in the development that we see through these independent reviews that are done by all these institutions. Are you talking here about hope? Why don't you give us a signal of hope? Because we need to tell people where the opportunities are and what is the risk that Chile confronts.
Bueno, efectivamente lo voy a concentrar
Well,
en el caso de Chile.
I'm going to focus on Chile,
Yo creo que también es relevante y que tú conoces muy bien, que tiene que ver con el comercio, ¿no? El comercio.
specifically on trade,
La
world
buena
trade.
noticia para nosotros,
The good news for us
el año
is
pasado
that last year
cruzamos la barrera de los 100
we
mil millones
crossed
de
the
dólares de
barrier of
exportaciones, lo que para un país de 20
$100 billion, which for a country with 20 million inhabitants, and our level of development is quite significant. And apparently, the figures are very, very interesting also as as far as investments are concerned. And the mining potential of the country is very high. Green development, energy, green hydrogen, the lithium industry, which is also expanding. I think that all that is very positive, and we can be happy about that. But the risk is there. Will we be able to keep up the pace? Because in a world scenario, a global scenario which is suffering many tensions, global tensions among the big powers, which have an impact on us, because of course it has an impact on our main export markets, fragmented trade, sanction regimes. So there are clouds as far as global trade is concerned. But we're not pessimistic. We think that these trends can be overcome, but there could be a problem there. Another positive element has to do with the private sectors in our countries in Latin America. This is a relatively new phenomenon these recent decades. Many Latin American companies have become global, and I realize that this is true. I am a foreign affairs minister, and I visit many countries from the global south, from the north, and I realize that we have a very dynamic private sector, and this gives us a lot of hope. So I think that there are green lights in trade, but there are also some clouds. Chile developed trade policy which is very active, but in a scenario that was very positive. We have agreements with 64 economies in the world and still growing, but the scenario has changed. So we need to adapt to this new scenario, and we need to be flexible and not to drown with all these tensions that are global.
Let's talk a little bit about Brazil.
Okay.
The bright spots and the highest risk that you think the Brazilian economy has to manage in 2025?
Sure, I'll go deep in Brazil. But very quickly still on the region, I think the most important risks, on my view, are still linked to populism, as Demian was pointing. Some people tend to think there's free lunch in economics, and there's absolutely no free lunch. Second, there's still a risk linked to domestic crime and fighting crime and violence. This is a big issue of the region. We should be talking here in Davos how to address that. And finally, a little bit on institutions and cutting red tape. I saw Ursula's speech, and it was a fantastic one, talking about even Europe cutting red tape. If Latin America does not cut red tape, we'll be in big trouble. About opportunities, very briefly, and I'll get into Brazil in a second. I still think the commodity sector is really, really relevant for the region. And don't get me wrong, it's very important to have this sector to feed the global economy, iron ore, soybeans and so on, agriculture, Brazil, Argentina, Peru, Mexico, and Colombia. So we can definitely help the global economy in this divide by feeding them. Again, if we keep ourselves away from this big topic or this big divide, I think we can benefit a lot. And finally, on the energy and sustainable environmental transition. So this is the region where these things can happen. So a bit on Brazil here. We are at a crossroads. So I'll be very brief, just to say we also have to do our choices. We decided to spend our budget too much. We decided to be fiscally, not to say responsible, but to grow the debt much more than we can stand. We have very high interest rates. So the next 2 years in Brazil will be decisive which way we'll take. So if we take a way of even mild adjustments, we will not be as strong as the Argentinian fiscal adjustment, but we can do some mild adjustments. Then interest rates can drop, the exchange rate will appreciate, we'll see lower inflation, and the economy will be fine. It's the most important economy of the region. Otherwise, if we take the negative way of just strengthening this idea of spending the budget, well, we might see some volatility markets, and I'm talking about maybe some huge volatility. The way I see the government addressing this topic right now is through a gradual approach. It can work, but it would depend a lot on the global economy. If the global economy helps, I think Brazil will be in good shape. If the global economy doesn't help, we might need to speed up.
Linda, what's the bright spot and the risk seen from where you sit?
So a bright spot and risk, mine are the same thing, same topic, which is the advancement of digitization. And one positive outcome of the pandemic was that our small businesses, our consumers got comfortable in a digitized environment. Their education of how to leverage digital tools, their access to digital tools advanced probably 5 years faster than it otherwise could. So net, that's a positive. We want everyone to have access, and we believe access can drive usage. But at the same time, that advancement in digitization can lead to risk in the system vis-a-vis cyber attacks. And safety and security right now, I think, is one of our the biggest threats that face us globally. Latin America, of course. In Mexico and in Brazil, there are more cyber attacks than anywhere else in Latin America. And these attacks are affecting our most vulnerable communities, small businesses, entrepreneurs, consumers who cannot afford to manage the impact and the outcome of a cyber attack. By 2028, the risk of cyber attacks will equate to $14 trillion. I mentioned earlier that MasterCard processes 10 trillion of volume annually. So the risk of cyber is actually greater than the sum total of the volume that we collect today. That is not a sustainable model. And so, again, here, as we sit collectively with representatives from all parts of the economy and of private and public, we need to unify around a common goal to protect our digital ecosystem, to implement the most modern and innovative safety and security tools, tokenizations, passkeys, tap on phone. These are tools that we're working on, others are working on, to make it much more difficult for fraudsters to penetrate our financial ecosystem. So I'd say this is one that keeps me up at night, but also makes me hopeful about our ability to drive growth in the future, because like never before, our citizens in Latin America have the ability to transact, to engage, and to cross borders. And that freedom and empowerment can lead to very, very positive things as well. We just have to protect it.
Thank you, Linda. Let me go to Demian.
Okay, so let me start with the opportunities. So let me address the current economic management in the country. As I started saying, it's been a pretty dramatic shift from the past. I would say there are three main areas. The first area is the macroeconomic stabilization. That's the realm of the central bank and the finance ministry. Minister Caputo and the president of the central bank, Santiago Basili, which has been bringing inflation down and the fiscal accounts in order. That is urgent and important. Then there is the work of the Minister of Deregulation. First of all, we have a Ministry of Deregulation. That alone should give you the idea of what our North is. So this ministry is also trying to bring the economy to the frontier of the possibility frontier of production, essentially getting rid of red tape and all this. You should see some of the old regulations that we have. So this ministry is getting rid of this unnecessary red tape. This is urgent and important. And then there is the important but not urgent, which is this area of trying to put the country in a path for growth in the medium term, which is what's going to bring growth not just now, not adjusting and clearing the path from deregulation and also getting rid of the crazy fiscal policies that we have, but how do we grow in the medium term? I would say that this is my neck of the woods. And there are many opportunities, but I would address one in particular. The development of artificial intelligence is driving a massive increase in energy demand. That's not just us, and it's not Latin America, it's everywhere. So everywhere in the world, you're going to have a massive increase, exponential, I would say, in the demand for energy. And there's only one way that we can supply that is clean, that is scalable, and that actually is stable. So clean, stable, and that has the capacity to scale is nuclear. So we need to stop looking at this the wrong way. And Europe, Germany in particular, they are the poster child of what not to do. There is one way that the world can actually cope with increasing demand of energy from AI, but it's not just AI, it's in general. This is nuclear. And for that, I'm going to be appointed the chairman of the Argentinian Nuclear Council. And what we're going to do with our nuclear program is actually trying to put Argentina at the front of this new energy revolution. I would say of all the things that we are doing for the medium term, this is probably the most important together with our AI initiative. So this is something that is not just for us. It's an opportunity for us, but I want to give you the wake-up call for the rest of the world. There's only one type of energy that actually can supply what we need. This is an opportunity. What's the main risk for the country? Well, you saw it. Things are going well, and we plan to make them better. The opposition is throwing everything but the kitchen sink at us. Why? Not because they are scared that this is going to be a disaster for the country. Not because they think, oh, this is bad for the poor or bad for the country. It's because they're afraid that this is going to work. Because they're afraid that this is going to work, and that's going to change the perception of society on whether they're normal and good policies for the future. That's our main risk. So the main risk is that the world sees what the left is doing, the problems that it creates everywhere, and that there is a different way of doing things. Seems to work. So I don't know, I would try something new that seems to work. And for everything else, there's MasterCard. I had to say it. I was dying to say that. Sorry.
Hopefully.
That's it. Drop the mic.
Hopefully you're not going to be.
Go on.
I love it. I love it. It's priceless.
I know, it's priceless.
It's priceless. Yeah.
Hopefully, Demian, you're not going to be in
so
charge of
tempted.
the nuclear button.
No.
Hopefully not. Hopefully not.
I would say, don't say off. I can say it. I said it. There you go.
Let me go to Victor. Opportunities. You know, what's the big opportunity that you want this room and the audience that is listening to us to keep in mind, bear in mind concerning the Dominican Republic, and what's the risk that you see in the horizon?
Bueno, la verdad es que nosotros vemos.
Well, actually, we see many opportunities in our challenges. But Honorato has mentioned that there's no such thing as a free lunch, and we have to fight what's illicit, and we need to do it very firmly. And before this, which is good in this forum, I went across Darentane, chairman of the OMPI. The Dominican Republic could leave the 0.1 list, the black list that the U.S. U.S. had, because for 3 years we have defended the patent registry and we've defended trademarks, and we're also fighting illicit trade, especially in tobacco, alcohol. During the pandemic, there were 3,000 deaths due to alcohol adulterated with ethanol, and now it's stopped. So, and when a country gives guarantees to its investors and acknowledges how much it costs to get a trademark and investment, then things get more lean. And we've made a registry through a law that makes public procurement compulsory to buy a national domestic product by 20%, especially product from businesses run by women. So our country has a specific responsibility, and we see that women are more reliable, and therefore they're very good in business. And so we want to give them incentives, and we are giving them access to the direct financial platform. And when we help support these small businesses with training and management so that they manage their small capital better, this has helped to get from 15% SMEs to 20% SMEs in our country. And when we talk about the risk concerning private and public partnerships, we think of great monopolies, oligopolies, but as President Benaber, we have also included the smallest businesses, and we're there to support them too. And if they have any issue, we help them to leave poverty behind. And an example of this 5% of GDP growth in the region, we've increased salaries, income by twice, and we've doubled salaries, and this gives a great purchase power to all. And this was the only president that was re-elected after the pandemics with a good percentage, and that is due to this. So within the economy and in America, there's a lot of things that we can really take advantage of, and we need to see how we can together take advantage of the opportunities to go forward. Now, let's see if the audience has questions. We'll take two. I'll ask you. Yes, there's one question from you. Yes, and I'm looking behind. If anyone, yes, here. This gentleman. So both questions, and it should only be one question. We don't want a whole statement. And yes, it's a question. Should I ask it in Spanish? Whatever you want, in Spanish. Thank you very much for this conversation. The Minister Bisono mentioned that the Dominican Republic is an example for independent government, and I agree. This helps bring robust and strong investments. But in the rest of Latin America, we see more authoritarianism, and in Venezuela and in El Salvador, we see how civil rights are lowering in Bolivia, and we see the situation of the embassy in Mexico. So how important is the democratic reduction to the growth of Latin America economy if institutions are weakened? Okay, thank you very much. Now the mic to your colleague. My question is more or less similar. It has to do with migration. I'd like to know how the migration affects the region. I'm talking about the Venezuelan diaspora and its impact, and also the loss of brains that leave the country. So maybe some economies are a bit old, like in Uruguay and Chile. Okay, thank you. And a last question, please. My question has to do with digital transition. AI is progressing very fast, and it was very interesting to hear Argentinians' opinion. But if this is the case, then the education system in Latin America is really behind. So what are you planning on doing in the private and the public and educational sector to improve this? Thank you. Alberto, would you like to say? Well, yes, I will start very briefly. The democratic process, democratic recession affects Latin America. It is true that it happens in Nicaragua, in Venezuela, but it's not the only one. And it has to do with the relevance of institutions. And this is the base of the issues in Latin America. How can we consolidate our institutions? We need more democratic and more inclusive and permanent institutions. And we need to also be able to overcome the political cycles that affect our countries too much. So we need to make efforts. The greatest effort is a domestic one. Unfortunately, internationally, there aren't many opportunities to go to progress in this field. But I think that basically this is a challenge nowadays. Now, migration, this is a quite complex issue. Many countries are facing it due to the Venezuelan exodus, which is a true tragedy. When we remember what Venezuela was like, it's going backwards 20 years ago, and it's among very serious crises nowadays, and this has led to a massive immigration that is affecting our societies. And as you've said here, yes, migration brings a great value. It covers very valuable services, especially the countries that have an older population, older demography, like in the case in Chile, but on the other hand, it affects also social services that are already quite weak. But we all know, and we know it even in the European case, it is very hard to reach a consensus between countries and to get a greater cooperation to face this problem regionally. Yes, sorry, Demian. Sorry, I have to leave just 1 minute. If I may, I will answer one of the 3 questions, and this is a good question. Anything that one do is too little, because we're always backwards, especially in Latin America. In Argentina, we really want to progress with AI so that technology helps us, because in our country, we can't leave technology behind. So on February 14th, we will make a statement. So if you're interested, wait for a few weeks and you'll hear what we'll do in our country, in Argentina.
Sí, comenzando con la primera pregunta de la.
So, starting with the first question about the region, Dominican Republic 4 years ago launched an initiative with Panama, Costa Rica, and then Ecuador to develop democracy, thinking about social and economic stability. And we would like to welcome other countries with APEP. This was a program launched by President Biden, and which still hasn't been formalized, but we think that we could go further because of the conditions in Latin America. Migration or immigration, as we know, is different in every continent or in every region. We would like our neighbor, Haiti, not to be left alone, and we cannot be a solution for our neighbor. But we have problems with the United States and in Europe even. So each case is special, and I think that the presence of people in one country or the other needs to be formalized through the constitution and the laws of every country. And the challenge that this lady was talking about with technology, well, that is something that the world requires. AI is now here, and we need to pay attention that everybody has access to it, even if the no matter the differences, social differences or religious differences, etc. So I was asked by our Foreign Affairs Minister, to invite you to the Conference of the Americas, which will take place in Punta Cana at the end of the year. Thank you. So with this announcement and this good news, thank you very much for having helped us understand the risks, opportunities at a national level, and the impact of international turbulences too. I think that we now have a very clear idea and a very strong sense that there is something that is piloting the plane in Latin America. So thank you very much.